program coordinator. And we are at the Accessible Community Forum on digital accessibility. So thanks for making time on this lovely Friday afternoon in the summer. It's an important topic and we're gonna have a really great discussion today. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the importance of the land on which this online event is taking place. The Disability Foundation works from the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. This acknowledgement is a statement to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their history. So thank you for joining us and participating in this Accessible Community Forum on digital accessibility, presented by the Disability Foundation and co-hosted by Connectra Society. I'm a program coordinator, as I mentioned, and the purpose of this forum is to gain insights and feedback from the community around digital accessibility in British Columbia and the digital space as a whole in Canada. Here at Connectra, we value diverse opinions and perspectives. We want this to be a safe environment for everyone to share. So please be respectful of what others have to say and wait your turn to speak. We will try our best to get to everybody and all of your questions. Just going to do a couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. This forum is being recorded and streamed to Facebook and YouTube, so you are more than welcome to choose to have your camera on or off, whatever you're comfortable with. All participants are muted upon entry, so you don't have the ability to unmute yourself, but you can use the raised hand function to ask a question under reactions in the bottom of your screen. And then a moderator, myself or Maya, the assistant program coordinator at Connectra, will call on you and will unmute you to speak. Or you can use the chat. If you'd like to ask a question in the chat, we will make sure that our host gets to it. You can also use the chat for comments. If you require a screen reader, we recommend that you close the chat, just so it doesn't get confused. We will be sending out a complete transcript of the chat after this event to all attendees. That will go out early next week, a summary email of all of our chats and resources and everything mentioned. We do have automatic closed captioning available. If you require it, please go to the button at the bottom of the Zoom meeting, click live transcript, and then show subtitles to turn them on. Moving over to our agenda, we have our welcome. We're going to do some panelist introductions. Then we're going to have a nice open discussion and closing summaries, and we'll wrap up just before 3 o'clock, and you can go and enjoy your weekend. Now we're going to play a short video outlining some of our other programming at Connectra. You can register for a range of our programming and events on our website at connectra.org. I'll also put that in the chat. Make sure to get your tickets for our community barbecue on August 27th. That's happening at Jericho Sailing Center. And tickets are available now at Eventbrite. I will also put that in the chat. Go ahead, Maya.
Connectra creates opportunities for people with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards better inclusion and quality of life. August will include the following programming: Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative. Tuesdays are for ABC Studios Art Break with Connectra. Wednesdays are chair yoga with Bobby Seal-Kabisky. Thursdays are adaptive fitness with Ocean Rehab and Fitness. Fridays are contemporary improv dance classes with Janice Lawrence. Also coming up is Connectra's Community Barbecue. Join us on August 27th from 5 to 7 p.m. for a casual social gathering to celebrate another successful year and our Society's volunteers. Check out our updated programming calendar on our website, connectra.org, or follow us on social media.
Awesome. So let me get to the panelists. Today's all-star panel includes Kim Donaldson, the Fable Pathways lead at the accessible technology company Fable Tech Labs. Also Shane Kehoe, the community talent manager at Fable Tech Labs. Shane is visually impaired and recruits people with disabilities to test technology accessibility. We have Ian Price, who is the innovation strategist and peer team lead at the nonprofit Technology for Living, which works with people with disabilities adapting technology to improve independent living. Nate Toevs, the marketing manager at Neil Squire, a nonprofit with many programs to provide assistive technology for Canadians with disabilities. And we also have Katrina Summers, who is the web governance and content strategy team lead for the City of Vancouver, as well as Jen McLean, who's also from the City of Vancouver and the web governance and government digital experience team lead. Now I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Kim.
Thanks, Emily. Great to be here this afternoon. Don't have too much more to say from Emily's introduction. I'm based in Victoria, BC. Have been familiar with the Disability Foundation and all of its associate organizations for the last few years. I've been working with Fable for the past 2 years, working with Shane in hiring accessibility testers for our community. So we employ assistive technology users to test the products and apps of our customers. We're based out of Toronto, and at the moment, my role is a little bit more focused around Fable Pathways. It's a free, accessible learning program for people with disabilities interested in advancing their careers in the tech sector. I'll pass it back to you, Emily, or pass it over to Shane.
Yeah, perfect. Let's pass it over to Shane. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Shane. I'm lucky enough to work with Kim, and I'm the community talent manager at Fable. I like, as mentioned, I recruit all of our accessibility testers, and I'm lucky enough to meet a lot of people, as I do my job, and I'm lucky enough to work closely with our community as well, of accessibility testers who are all absolutely amazing. Another thing that's interesting about me is I actually used to be an accessibility tester. I'd say, I don't know, about 3 years ago. I'm going on 3 years at Fable. And yeah, it's just a little bit about me. I'm visually impaired and I use screen magnification. More specifically, I use Zoom text, and I will pass it on to whoever's next.
Perfect. Thank you, Shane. We'll pass it on to Ian next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Ian Price. As Emily mentioned, I'm the innovation strategist and peer team lead at Technology for Living. We are a nonprofit organization that supports individuals with physical disabilities throughout British Columbia. Our head office is in the Lower Mainland, but I live in the beautiful Okanagan. And over to Nate.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate the intro. Nate Toevs from Neil Squire. I've been with the company 8 years. We're going to celebrate our 40th year in Canada next year. We do a variety of different things, working for people with disabilities, skill development with computer training, employment programs, connecting employers to people that just happen to have a disability. We've got tons of other abilities, and our superpower is assistive technology. And I'm pleased to be the marketing manager for the Work BC assistive technology program here in British Columbia, providing funding for assistive technology products to help people get employed or stay in the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Let's pass it over to Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina Summers. I work at Government Digital Experience within the BC government. So Jen and I co-lead digital accessibility, strong focus on content strategy, understanding how digital accessibility works for people or doesn't work for people, getting people to really understand what the rules are and how to do that in their work. It's a big job and a big shift in culture that the two of us are trying to do. And I will pass it over to Jen.
Thanks, Katrina. So as Katrina said, we work together in Government Digital Experience for the BC government. My name is Jen McLean. I'm the team lead of web governance and digital accessibility, which is so many words. I also identify as neurodivergent, and I have several invisible disabilities as well. I lead the digital accessibility auditing program I say program, it's just me currently, but we're manifesting a larger program. The purpose of that program is to use a combination of automated and manual testing on government websites, web applications, mobile apps, videos, and documents to assess them for their accessibility compliance and to help build capacity internally with developers and product owners.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm now going to pass things over to our hosts. So please welcome Dave Thompson, Community Outreach Coordinator at Richmond Center for Disability. Dave lives with physical disabilities and uses his experiences to teach his community on a wide variety of life improvement topics and life skills, including digital accessibility and assistive technology. He is dedicated to serving and improving his community. Take it away, Dave.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Dave Thompson from the Richmond Center for Disability. And my big thing is that before I got here, and I was also, just like Shane said, I was a user, then I bought the company sort of idea, the old joke. But my big thing is trying to make anything accessible to the lowest common denominator. I think we have definitely got a long way, but there's still a long way to go. We need to be able to make especially digital accessibility to that person who doesn't have to become an advocate and a noisy sort of, and know all this stuff to get it. And that still happens a lot in the community, is that, oh yeah, I had to make myself an advocate, then I found all this stuff up and I went and did it. But we need to, not everyone can do that. They're not capable of it and they shouldn't have to. We need to be able to get it to that lowest common denominator, that person that's just starting their illness that doesn't have those tools. And that's sort of my goal with doing things like this.
Absolutely. We're glad that you can be a part of the conversation. I'll let you
Great,
take it
thank
away
you.
with some questions.
All right, so we can get started. I just watch my head going back and forth to screens here. To start the conversation, can you each define digital accessibility? I think everyone can. I was thinking maybe we'll go to Nate at first.
Oh, thanks, Dave. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Well, to me, and I'm not an expert on anything really, but digital accessibility means that all the people, regardless of whether of their ability and disability, can access the digital world that we're living in today, whether that be the computer, on the internet, watching television, listening to a podcast, any of those things where you're not in a physical space with another human. That to me would be digital accessibility.
Great. Anyone else have anything to add to that? From a more technical standpoint, maybe Kim?
I think Nate did a really great job summarizing. In terms of the technical aspects, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but really based around equal access. Everybody deserves to have the same access to the things that Nate mentioned, so the same access to information, to resources, and to products. And so at Fable, we help with all of those things, whether it's contact forms or shopping experiences or using apps. It's so that everyone has the same access and the same choices. Because when we don't have the same digital accessibility, then we're limiting people's choice and of their own experience.
And that's often the case. Is it's not just about knowing about it. Everyone has some people say, yeah, all you have to do is phone these people, but those people put you on 15 minutes of robocalls and you can only sit at the computer for 15 minutes a day. So you have to keep coming back every one. Hopefully it gets quicker, right? And that has happened to me. That happened to me many times. It's like I have a set time on my computer. I can't waste almost all of it on a hold, right?
And that's a great example. And I think it's a great point that everybody has their own experiences and their own needs. And so by creating an accessible digital experience for as many people as possible, and so people can engage with those digital products in many different ways, then everyone has that choice to interact with it in the way that makes sense for them.
Awesome. So I'm just taking a look at, I have to keep switching mouses here. Some of our survey respondents said that barriers to the internet and digital services prevent them from using them. Do you think the internet as a whole should have accessible standards for all websites? So that's a sort of a standard on all the different magnifications and all that sort of stuff. Or is it too hard to achieve? Is standardization too hard to achieve? Ian, how about you start with that one?
Of course, it should be accessible to everybody. I think that's a silly question. I think businesses should appreciate that they're losing money by
It's a market. It's a market, right?
It is,
Yeah,
yes.
it's a community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like when we moved in, when RCD moved into the mall, I've kind of been sort of promoting that, you know, it's like, this is a community. We have people that will spend and buy, and you have to sort of look at it that way. How about Katrina? Any thoughts? So
I mean, absolutely. And there are, like, we have the web content accessibility guidelines, which are international guidelines for people to follow. They're not the be all end all, but they're a really great starting point for people in terms of figuring out what it is that they need to do. But I think it also comes to thinking about accessibility. People tend to think of it as kind of this small population that's going to be impacted by it. And the reality is that when you're making something accessible, when you're designing for accessibility with that actually in mind from the beginning, you're making something that's going to be more usable for everybody, regardless of where they are at in their lives. Because there's so many different aspects in every single individual human, and there's going to be, you know, you're going to want to access some things with a keyboard just because for whatever reason you wanted to do that, whereas somebody will have to access something with a keyboard. So, you know,
and that's the sort of nature of humans, is that we sometimes will not use something until we have to do it, but we should have done it 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, let's just make it better for everybody.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's what when I went to voice software, it was just like, oh, well, you know, my wife starts using voice software. She's a typist. She's been typing for 25 years. I don't know what her wrists look like, but you know, it may allow her to type for another 5 because she takes a break every once in a while and switches it on and off. But other people would think that, go, oh, I don't need that. Well, that's not the concept, is that if you can get it so it's so common. I was thinking about this last night, like electric bikes and COVID. Now, you know, I was an electric bike user before a lot of people were, and now it's so accessible, and everyone thought, why didn't we, you know, how have we not been at this, you know, for so long, right? Alrighty, so I see the green on there. So are there any ramifications for not following the WCAG web content accessibility guidelines, or should there be? So is there, I guess maybe this might be a government question. I hear guidelines as it's government. So I don't know if Jennifer, you know anything about that. So this is basically some sort of watchdog or some sort of area that, you know, if you don't do it, you're not following the rules.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So we do, of course, have the Accessible BC Act, which came into force in 2021. With that, we do expect that there will be the development of regulations and standards in, I can't remember how many different areas, I want to say 9 or 11. There are several areas that they're developing standards and regulations for. So I do think eventually that there will be consequences. Right now, the answer is no. At least not from government.
Yeah, because enforcement usually takes a long time, right?
It does, yeah. And I mean, they have a period of, I think, almost a decade to fully develop those regulations and standards, which is quite a long time, but it is important to be thoughtful. So one of those areas is information and communications, which of course websites would fall under. So likely, yes, there will be. We certainly see that in other jurisdictions that have had legislation of this kind for longer, such as in the United States or even in Ontario. And we would expect that it would be, you need to be compliant with WCAG AA because that is the international standard. It would be a little bit unusual to diverge from that in any meaningful way. So chances are that is something that will come into force in the coming years. But to Ian's point, like, there are already other consequences. Businesses are losing money and customers because they are not compliant. people are missing out on services that they probably need access to because they are not currently accessible.
And then people are becoming vocal over social media sometimes,
Yes.
and things, that issue, which,
Yeah.
isn't always suggested, but it does have its place, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ideally, individuals would not have to hold organizations accountable. That is certainly not an ideal state. That is not what we want to see. But I have a colleague in Microsoft who also works in accessibility, and we often talk about the things that motivate people, and integrity would be great. That's always what we hope for. But if it's fear or ego instead, we'll still take it.
Well, we did a video on the acting community and people with disabilities, and about a year ago, and someone was saying that a lot of the crews and a lot of the film crews and whatnot, they don't do accessibility because they're scared to do it wrong.
Mhm.
So they just don't do it.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I get that, but
But also,
yeah.
I would just add to what Jen was saying about what is there is, I mean, the other thing is that in Canada, the federal government was sued successfully more than a decade ago for not having accessible online services. And they were sued using the Charter of Human Rights. So that is our, Canadian charter that applies across the board, that is across the entire country. A legal precedent has been set. So, there is risk in that because, a court decided already that this is a human right. This is something that people should have access to. So, we may not have specific stuff in place at the moment, but there is already, this is covered as a human right within that charter. So just something for people to think about in terms of
Awesome.
the risk associated.
Yeah. So we go to another sort of definition question, just so there's some people that may not know. I think I'll call on Shane for this. How do you define assistive technology, since you sort of use it actively? I have a father-in-law who just recently passed away, who was also had vision issues. He had retinitis pigmentosa, and he used a very large mouse and talked. And then when I would have to ask him, when he'd have to ask me to help him with the computer, I'd like, can you please shut that off? It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, to me, assistive technology is anything that helps somebody to be able to do the same thing that others are doing, and it could be anything from a screen reader to screen magnification to things like a head mouse or eye gaze, or to a portable CCTV or a full-size CCTV. So for example, like anything that, for me, like for example, like years ago when I started losing my sight, I honestly was pretty ignorant about assistive technology, and I didn't even really realize anything about it. And I remember seeing my very first piece of assistive technology, which was an actual CCTV, and then Zoom text. And when I started losing my sight, I thought I would never, ever, ever, ever be able to use a computer again. And then seeing how this works, it just opened up everything for me. And so like really my definition is like anything that helps anybody be able to do anything that they want to in an equitable way that everybody else can. Whether it being, purchasing something online, or applying for a job, or going through that interview process, going through like the recruitment process online, or anything at all, purchasing plane tickets without it timing out on them. Just anything. So that's kind of like my definition, if that makes any sense.
There's that empowerment and that confidence. I know
exactly.
Later on in his life, my father-in-law, it was his window to the world. It was his only access to anything. He hardly left his room and whatnot. And that was his last sort of bastion. He could still absorb news and hear everything and have conversations. And if he lost that computer, that was it. Sort of thing. So we tried to hold on to that as much as possible. When I first got sick, my first assistive technology was one of those grabbers, those reacher grabber things. And it was amazing to me because now I could help my wife pick up our son's toys. And I could feel like, that she didn't have to do one more extra thing that day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm not reading this. Many of our survey responses said that's a great way to increase, but I can't see the rest of that question. I don't know if it can be expanded. So if I sort of go, oh, there we go. Okay, now I can see it. So the digital accessibility is a way to have accessible features incorporated into websites and digital services before they launch without need for special mods. So is that possible, and how would that look? I don't know where we can go with that one. Maybe we'll start with Fable. Kim?
Sure, I'd love to. As you're reading the question, Dave, my eyes were getting larger and larger. Just because it's like no, just getting really more excited, more excited response. So we work with our customers to a term that we use is shift left, with the idea that accessibility is included in that development and design process earlier and earlier. So as opposed to creating a product at whether it's a physical product or digital product, the process could be similar, as opposed to creating that product and then saying, oh yeah, let's have a look at accessibility and make sure we're good to go. It might be more costly. It definitely will take more time, and most likely it will not be as accessible as if accessibility was included in that process from the outset. And so we work with our customers and encourage designers and developers to start to include and consider accessibility from the outset, and also ensure that folks with disabilities are a part of that process and a part of that consultation throughout that design process. And then even after release, as there are updates, even if you're doing something small like adding a new photo or updating your product, ensuring that accessibility is a part of that process as well. So 100% can be done. Just takes a bit of a shift in mindset, and sometimes if you're working with a larger organization, might take a little while to get organizational buy-in. And I imagine for both Jen and Katrina, that's going to be part of your roles, working with the provincial government, a larger organization, yeah, thanks for advocating. It's such a large place.
I'm a firm believer on getting the people that have been there, done that, and got the T-shirt to help out when someone might just be trained. I don't want to bash on the government here, but when I was a prison guard, we had implementation of things that were just from people that hadn't been on the line for a long time, and they didn't work because they didn't ask the guys that were using them every day. And that was always very frustrating. But I will let you guys protect yourself now, Katrina.
No, I mean it's true. It is really, really hard to get this in a large organization like ours, and it can be quite disjointed in terms of approach to web. Skill development is a huge part of it, of getting people to not just know that WCAG exists and that those guidelines within it are there and that we are committed to doing them, but what that means and how to do it is so huge. And so there's lots of stuff that Jen and I are working on to try to support this really, really diverse community across government to be able to do this stuff in their work. So they do feel empowered to make those changes and start, driving it within their own product teams and within their own web teams. And Jen can add to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that it's a tricky balance sometimes, because no developer wants to hear that they're not doing their job well. That is not welcome feedback ever. So it is having that conversation of, no, you did a great job, but here's some things you maybe didn't know. And we're happy to work with you. We're happy to help you and your team build that internal capacity so that you can remediate not only the current product or website or service that we're looking at, but also when you think about developing your next thing, how to build it in a more accessible way. And it actually just becomes a part of the way that we work. But that can be a really challenging conversation to have. And not everyone is open to it. So it's really finding, what is going to be the thing that motivates that person? And how can we create resources that are going to support them so that they can self-serve as much as possible? And then, of course, being available to answer some of those crunchier questions and to provide that consulting and support where we can.
And you could see examples of this, in like health and safety when they started making people have to clip on the roof, and roofers and whatnot else were fighting it tooth and nail. I don't want to have that strap on me. It's going to slow me down. And like we had a program here in Richmond where it was called accessible at home. So you made one bathroom accessible, you made one door entry, you made one light switch and one electrical plug accessible at the building stage. Didn't have to be the whole house, just had to be enough so that someone could visit you or stay there for a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah.
Nate, did you put something in the chat? I don't know if you wanted to just read it out for us.
Yeah, well, it's as we talked about in our meeting yesterday before this event, is that it's got to be done right from the start. And it's exactly the same as a physical environment. If you build this place and it's not accessible to somebody in a wheelchair, as an example, and then you have to tear a bunch of stuff out and remodify, that costs a fortune. If they'd have just built it to begin with for all the people, because we're all, and I say this a lot in my travels, if we live long enough, most of us will have a disability, whether it's a vision, a hearing, a mobility, whatever it is. We all, or almost all of us, age into some level of disability. So let's build it, whether it's we're talking about digital today, let's build the website. Let's teach these folks that want to learn these skills right from the word go, not a side module that they can take as an elective. It's got to be part of the curriculum so that they're building it with that code built in. They understand the meta tags to explain to somebody that is low vision or blind what's in the picture, and all that. We strongly believe that if you build it that way, and that's how these young developers learn, eventually, hopefully we don't need to have this conversation again.
Yeah, it's just muscle. It's just muscle memory, right? It's just muscle memory. They just do it like everything else. It doesn't have a big underline or, oh, remember we have to put this in, sort of thing, right? All righty. So I think that that's definitely something that we all agree on from that sort of point of view. One of the other so here's a big thing. Let's talk about respondents of physical disabilities are not aware of the assistive technologies to assist them. And that's kind of my big thing. What are some of the assistive technologies for people with physical disabilities, and how can someone start to research what they might benefit from? Because I hate when people said, oh yeah, you should have known that about a long time ago. Well, how am I supposed to know if you don't tell me, right? Nate, you probably the best one to sort of start off on that, but.
Well, thanks, Dave. Again, not an expert, but I work with a bunch of really good experts. I've just put in the chat, askjan.org is the job accommodation network in the United States. They have a wonderful resource that shows the gazillion different assistive technologies out there. There is a lot. One of the big things in our process is an assessment by an occupational therapist to understand what somebody's dealing with as it relates to, and most of the work that we do is either in training, education, skill development for an individual that has a barrier, or from an employment standpoint. So understanding truly what that individual's disability is, how does it impact the activities they're trying to accomplish? And then they work with one of our assistive technology specialists. So it's not always simple. Are there things that are simple? Absolutely. In fact, on our phones and most of our PCs or Macs today, there's a ton of different accessibility options to help people listen to content or enter content into some sort of platform. But when it comes to somebody with a more challenging case as it relates to their employment or skill development needs, that's where the professionals come in and really have an understanding, because that's the work that they do every day of how does this impact this individual? What are the tools out there? Are they software, hardware, high tech, low tech, ergonomics, hearing aids? And so it is a bit of a process. And sometimes it's the cost of that process that becomes the barrier for the individual or the company. And that's why we're blessed to be a part of that Work BC assistive technology program that removes those barriers, that gets those people the help that they need, whether it's the individual or whether it's the employer that's trying to hire inclusively. It is a process, but there is help out there for businesses and individuals to move that needle forward.
Awesome. So I think we'll, Ian, I think you definitely someone who can talk about this and maybe talk a little bit more about the cost from your standpoint. and what you guys do?
Absolutely. So another great resource I find is peer support groups. I found some of the most useful information that I receive is from individuals who have similar barriers or face similar barriers. So that's been a huge help. For cost, everything that our organization does is at no cost to our members. It's a free membership. And this really helps people who we're like it's a barrier. Finance is a barrier, and we really try to overcome that, allowing people to have access to the technology for free.
And yeah, and that's that whole piece. As soon as you know what it is and if you can use it, and you should be using it at that stage. Let me just roll up. Can you guys? Does anyone else that I want to throw in there? Maybe Shane. I'm just moving my screen here.
Just trying to think. Like, yeah, cost of like. I'm located in Ontario, and we have something called the ADP, so Assistive Devices Program. And what it is it helps people who need assistive technology be able to purchase it, and it'll cover 75% of it. And then, like, you're responsible for the rest. However, there is Ontario Disability Support Program as well that will cover the other 25% if you're on ODSP is what we call it. And other organizations that back in the day that I accessed to get one of my first, I think it was Zoom text, was like service clubs, and it was actually the Lions Club that helped me, and they helped me get my very first or second, I can't remember, but it was Zoom text, and it was awesome. So, like, reaching out to different service organizations, you just never know who can help with it. So, just reaching out where you can and when you can. And
I always try to tell people that if your family has been involved in a union or anything like that, service clubs or anything, that there may be scholarships and whatnot available, it's always 100%. A good thing to check in. I actually got a digital voice recorder from the Lions Club here in Richmond when I was going to school, and that I was able to use that with Caper, and they put all my books on digital on MP3, and that's how I studied, because I couldn't physically carry a book. I couldn't hold it, and I would fall asleep and drop it all the time.
Exactly. And when I went back to school, they had all my books, digital format as well, and it's amazing that the stuff is out there. And when you're in school, there's so many scholarships and grants that a lot of people don't even apply for. And I always say, like, apply for everything and anything, and you never know what you're going to get, because it's better to possibly get it for assistive technology or whatever you might need than it going to waste.
Yeah. I was able to get a grant I thought it was great, because it was called the Lifelong Learner Scholarship. And you had to be over 25. So you didn't have to fight all the youngins for the money. I thought, okay, I got a chance at this one.
Exactly.
And that one was awesome. And they helped me out with, I think it was $4,000 per semester. And I always tell people, go on those sites, make sure you never, one thing with all those scholarship search sites is they should never ask you for money. So if they ask you to pay anything, then that's really not legit. And again, you can put in all your parameters and you just get email. I used to just get email saying this one's coming up. You got a week to write an essay or whatever it is, right?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. So, yeah.
And Katrina, I know that there's a gentleman, I'm trying to think of his name. I don't know if you, that helps out with the schooling and all that sort of stuff. I've worked with him a lot, and he's in Victoria. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but if I find it, I will put his name. I've talked to him about education and whatnot before. He's a former Paralympian basketball player, I believe.
Oh, I don't, Jen? I'm
But
like,
I will,
I don't know.
I'll look up his name. I'll put it in the chat if I can find it. But can you guys talk any more about if there is what it comes, because I think too, there's a confidence that you have to have, right? There's a confidence you have to ask for the things. And that's kind of the big thing, is that when do you get to that stage in your illness or what else? And also, if you're dealing with money and whatnot else, do you know you can use it? Like, do you know do I want to get this? Do I win this scholarship? And gee, I didn't know I could do a whole full semester. My illness waved up and now I got to quit, sort of thing. So there's a lot of things there. I don't know, anyone wants to sort of chime in on that as well, if that's like a challenge. And if you have any sort of advice for people to get it, because that was something that I went through too. I was like, what happens if I can't do this? These guys have given me money and now I can't do it.
Dave, maybe you're the one to answer that question since you
Yeah.
experienced it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think one thing that Shane mentioned was just asking questions. Is that kind of how you navigated that? So you knew what the parameters were?
But it was still sort of in the back of your mind going, I hope that this is the right time, that I picked the right time to do this. And, I don't have to give this money back and try again and whatnot else. But I think that's the whole thing that I'm sort of saying, is that we want to make people as questionable as possible, not just the ones that are super confident and got it all planned and ready. We want to reach those people too. Right. And I think doing things like that's how you do that. Right. So let's go to another question, if anyone else has anything else. So we have many response noted that a few key issues they encounter on more websites are small text, small links, and buttons, website forms, and timing out. Yeah, I have a problem with timing out as well. I type like a gorilla. And also, is there there's some challenge with the voice software mixing with those forms, is there not? Or has that been solved? Ian, do you know much about that?
It is getting better, but contact forms, fillable forms have been an issue over the years. Navigation bars, alt tags are still overlooked at times, which is shocking to me because they've been around forever. But yeah, there are little things that could be improved on for sure across the board.
All right.
I
Okay.
can,
So yeah,
I'd love to jump in as well.
Sure.
I saw when you were kind of starting this question, Dave, I saw nods kind of across the panel. I think the things that you mentioned are just such common experiences. And so one thing that I want to say is that often this is not the user's fault. And I think if you're a relatively new assistive technology user, you might not know. But kind of the start of this conversation, some of the folks on the panel, including myself, talking about websites and apps being built in a way that they're accessible. So again, just in the same way that the physical environment can be built in a way that is accessible, the digital environment can also be built in an accessible way. And so things like forms timing out, yes, a form does not have to have an end time. It's not like a thing when you make a form that pick a time, you've got to have a time. That's not a thing. So 100%, and it just kind of, whoever's designing that form needs to have that knowledge and understanding that, for some folks, it might take a little bit longer than it would take them to complete it.
or maybe there's a button that you can click saying, I have
need
time
more
on
time.
issues, or, yeah, right.
Yeah. And then, but to the point of some buttons being unlabeled. And so, whether you're a screen reader user or a voice navigation user with something like Dragon or voice control on Apple products, sometimes buttons aren't labeled properly. And so you can't get to where you want to go. And same thing there. Yes, buttons can be labeled in a way where they are compatible with those assistive technologies. And so often what ends up happening, just calling back to one of your earlier questions, is that people don't end up using that resource, and so they'll go somewhere else, whether that's information seeking or product seeking. They'll go somewhere else and they'll tell their community about the one that worked for them. So there is a business case for it, and unfortunately, when the decision makers are looking to enact change, dollars and cents often play a part in it, but there is a very strong business case for making your digital product accessible.
Alrighty, now I'm just figuring out my lines here. Respondents commonly mention simple navigation, large text, and contrasting colors as features on accessible website. What are some of the other features that make a website accessible? Oh, that's a really good question. Because those are about the only ones that I know of. But I know our guys here have do a lot of it. So Jennifer, can you guys maybe start off there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one that popped into my mind was headings, using them correctly to create semantic structure on the page. Really, it should act like a table of contents, and often that is not how we see them being used. You know, ideally, you want to have H1 followed by H2, H3, H4. You want them to appear in sequence because that's going to create a logical reading order if someone is not sighted, if they can't follow that visual reading order. But often what happens is they are used stylistically. So they like the font size or the weight, or you might see someone using, you know, a heading 6 for a breadcrumb and then a heading 3 for the next topic, which is wild, but also not that uncommon. So using headings well and thoughtfully to create a proper semantic structure on the page, that's huge. Using descriptive links. So rather than saying click here, where you have hyperlinked the words click here, you might say click here to learn more about this government initiative or whatever, where the actual context of where that link is sending the user is what's hyperlinked. Because the link is going to be pulled out completely out of context. That surrounding text is not helpful if you're using a screen reader in most cases.
And does that become an issue, that like the design and stuff like that messing with accessibility messing with design? Is that a battle that sometimes you have?
I would say so. I mean, I think the conflict is overstated by people who don't understand accessible design. It is very possible to have an aesthetically pleasing design that is also accessible. It just requires that you know what you're doing and that you plan for it, which is, I think, where a lot of the internal conflict comes from. But it is entirely possible. You just need to be thoughtful. You need to know your content really well. So often what Katrina and I run into with plain language in particular, which is another thing that is low to no cost that people can do to improve the accessibility of their websites. People don't always know what they're trying to say. And when you challenge them to put it in plain language, that becomes very apparent. So
yeah,
it really,
ask a lawyer
again,
that.
right? We hear that all the time. Legalese and policy, I would say, are like the two biggest areas we get questions about when we are advocating for plain language, because it's like, but it has to be this way. And it's like, well, perhaps. Or could we provide a plain language summary and hyperlink to the actual legal document for people who want to, you know, parse through 30 pages of really intense, very difficult to understand language. So I think contrast errors are another one that I see quite often. My very favorite error that I've ever encountered while auditing a website, and I won't say who it belonged to because that's unkind, but my very favorite error was a low contrast error of a very, very light, like almost white gray on a white button to toggle high contrast mode on the site. It's just the irony, incredible. I don't know, Katrina, do you have anything to add?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot that we run into. I think to add on to what Jen said, there's part of it's just sloppy code. Like
Yes. Yeah.
Kim talked about this a bit with the like buttons that are missing labels, or just the things that should be done and that people just aren't doing, or things that get left in empty links. You know, they leave part of the code in there and they forget to pull it out. I guess lots of reasons that it can happen, but also a really good, I guess, like case for having somebody test your site before you go live with it, you know, having somebody else go through it that understands the code and make sure that that stuff isn't in there. Because I think a lot of what happens on the back end is people figure, oh, well, nobody can see this, so it doesn't really matter. And it's like, well, okay, maybe people can't see it if they're sighted, but this is the stuff that the screen reader is going to pick up and throw people into the wrong places or trap them into space. Navigate them through like in a really weird way. You know, that there's so many things where like, yeah, it really matters what you do on the back.
Do you think there's an ego issue when it comes to, I'm not into that computer world, but do you think there is?
So.
a
Yeah,
bit.
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. People,
yeah.
like Jen said, right? People don't want to be told they're doing a bad job of things, and so we try to find nice ways to tell people that they're doing a bad job of things. But there's, it's also skill development. Like it is something that people weren't necessarily taught. And I think similar to not knowing what assistive technology is out there when, you know, maybe you first develop a disability and are having to use an assistive technology and not knowing what's there. I think it's similar for coders in that they, you know, until they go through that experience, they don't really realize how impactful that is and the impact that they're having on people. So I think it's really a lot of it is just that culture shift of getting it into that kind of mainstream knowledge of having people know this is something that's important and then how to do it. And once we get there will be less resistance, I think.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not. I don't think you should feel bad about forgetting it, even though you work in the industry sometimes, because sometimes it just happens. Like my whole family have known about my father's blindness for years, and sometimes we'd be in a car, and I'd look at my wife, going, "You do know you're taking driving directions from a man that's been blind for 20 years." Just want to let you know. And I talked to my father-in-law, go, you know, this might be something you can probably let go now, you know. So it still was forgotten in our house often, right? Oh, just show it to him. Oh yeah, he can't see, right? And I think if we get that to that place, we're not worrying about, oh my God, I'm going to see something on Instagram or someone complaining, or, you know, and that whole thing about what I mentioned with the actors worrying about someone, you know, being mad and putting something on Facebook about it, than just trying to learn how to do it right.
Yeah.
So someone had here is, should accessibility be part of coder trainings? Is that
Yes.
so? Basically, that's what we're getting at,
100%.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. To Katrina's point, I mean, you can't hide garbage code from a screen reader. You might be able to hide it from a sighted user by commenting it out or, you know, manipulating the CSS or whatever you've done on the back end. You cannot hide from a screen reader. If you have been sloppy with the way that you have constructed your site, if you have not been thoughtful about it, it will be very apparent. And like to Katrina's point about sort of the hidden elements of what makes a web page work, things like keyboard navigation are very frequently broken. Or like, I would say almost overly designed site headers, navigations with drop downs, like they almost always go sideways when it comes to assistive technology. Toggling different states, like on a search bar, hovering over, you know, buttons or fields to trigger some kind of action. Sometimes that can be a really good litmus test for whether or not a developer has any understanding of accessibility, as if they're using focus states. Not always, but sometimes. But yes, absolutely, it needs to be a part of their training. I remember we run a community of practice called the Accessibility Community of Practice. And two of the guests that we had a while back were the founders of GAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, one of whom is a developer. And he was very clear. He was like, if you are a developer who has not educated themselves, who doesn't think this is important, you are not good at your job. And I appreciated how direct and blunt he was, because I agree, this is not optional. This is something that everyone needs in order to access information and services, and that is their right.
We have a university close to us, KPU, and their interior designer instructor would put people in wheelchairs for a whole day to sort of, you know, because again, it's that battle between design, oh, this looks good, but that sort of idea as well. So that's definitely something we can all, I guess, agree on. Just if anyone else has anything to say about that, I'm just going to sort of say that if anyone does have any questions that's active and out there, and all those names and some of the screen faces that I see, please put in the chat if you'd like, or raise your hand, and I will hopefully not crash the system trying to find you. And so our next question is about a lot of people on the survey indicated it was difficult for small business to afford making digital services accessible. I know we talked about this in our meeting. Are there cost-effective ways to increase digital accessibility, or is cost something that cost is just a big looming thing here, right? How about you, Nate? How about you with do you have any sort of idea about this when it comes to the business side of it? Because you would be hiring people to go into the businesses. Are they pushed back or?
Well, okay, I'm not sure about your last comment there, Dave, but you know, it comes back to what we were talking about before, which is if you just get it built right the first time,
then there doesn't have to be any.
Right now, it seems to me, and in some of the circles I network with, I've met many designers that don't know how to do it. They just don't. Did they have the opportunity to learn, like Jennifer and Katrina are talking about? They 100% did. They chose not to because they were more focused on making it pretty than making it accessible. So what has that created? It's created a situation where if you want it built accessible, it's more expensive because there's so few people that are doing it and that can do it effectively.
And that knowledge transfer
isn't
going, it's not getting fanned out, it's getting
That's right. Yeah.
in.
It's become a super niche area, whereas really it should be absolutely mainstream and widestream. So there are some products out there, and I know the one I'm about to say could cause people to go one way or the other. I know somebody in our office does not like this product. It's called Accessiby, and it is an add-on and I can see Jennifer, she's not happy about it, it looks like. But I've talked to other people that they have the opinion of this, which is it's better than the alternative of not being accessible. So I don't have a comment one way or the other because I don't know enough about it as an individual. Again, other people I work with are the experts in that field. But I do believe that if there's the alternative between not and some is better than none. And it's a pathway for us to get there in some fashion. And I know we were talking about AI a little bit yesterday, and maybe that's one way that can help. Maybe there's a path for AI to help with that, to make the process easier at the design level, easier at the, geez, we've already got one built, how can we make it better level? I'm not sure. Kim Donaldson, my friend, has much more expertise than this, and she's raised her hand.
I wouldn't call it expertise, but I've got some passion around it for sure. So yeah, Nate called out something important, I think, in that there's these things called overlays, which, you know, sometimes can help you get a little bit further, a little bit past nothing. But I think something to consider again is that accessibility is never done. It's not like a box you can check off and be like, cool, we did that, we're out, we're moving on to the next thing. You know, it's something that has to be returned to again and again. In terms of where smaller companies can start, I dropped in the chat. I think that the President's Group and Small Business BC, they partnered, I believe it was 2 years ago. And so there are now resources available to small businesses in the province of BC. If you're not familiar with the President's Group, they're a really great organization. They have lots of free resources on their website as well. Their website, I believe, is accessibleemployers.ca. And so there's things around like recruitment and hiring practices, but I know that there's more recently information on digital accessibility. The other thing is, I think, Katrina, you mentioned the WCAG guidelines, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Those are free and available for anyone to go check out. It can be pretty daunting though. There's a lot to go through. So in terms of where to start for your own business, you might want to consider, you know, what are the core functions or the core experience for the people who come to your website. You know, what are the top pages visited? What is the top user flow of people who go to that website? Maybe you want to start there and ensure that that flow is accessible. And that way, you know, you're making changes that are going to affect the most amount of people and then work out from there. So, you know, taking audit or taking stock of kind of like what's most valuable for the most number of people, and then moving on from there. I see Ian has his hand up, so I'm going to pass Ian.
Yeah, I just before that, my bosses online here have wanted me to. I was reading one of the comments from Maninder about from the start. the thought process should be, what if the person is blind? How will they make use of this product, software, or website? What if they cannot hear? How will they, so on? And then develop the product and software around there. So that low common denominator. Same thought process should be when designing physical buildings. What if someone can't manage stairs? We'll see a positive change sooner. So it's all basically around that same, start it at the start, right? Go ahead there, Ian. Throw down.
Thanks. Quick comment. So there are accessible WordPress templates that developers can use as a starting point, especially for those who aren't experienced in coding and web development. I think that's a good place to begin.
Alrighty. And one thing that we sort of, we always, you know, it's always great when you get everybody together and it's always about bashing, but we also want to focus on some of the things that we've done right. And some of the things that have happened. You know, I always, you know, I think about back in COVID when my wife said before that she worked in the legal industry. She goes, I'll never work at home. They'll never be able to make me work at home because it's legal stuff. And she's been working at home for years. So we have made some strides, right? So talk about what's instead of talking about the lacking in digital accessibility, what are some of the progresses that you guys have seen? What are some of the highlights? You know, pat yourself on the back, please. I'll start with you again, Ian. What are some of the things you've seen that you really are happy about?
Well, as somebody who uses assistive technology and is surrounded by it on a daily basis, yeah, I'm thrilled to be in a time where it is so available, whether it's hardware, software. I think it's becoming so mainstream now that it's available for so many people. Voice assistants, I think, are huge. They're in so many homes now, and even my dad, who is terrified of computers, can ask Google a question and it will give him an answer without even needing to look at a computer screen.
My mother-in-law says you have to say thank you to Siri because she listens.
I think some of the other wins that Shane, you can maybe speak to this more than I can, just because you engage with our community a little bit more than I do. Just the number of organizations who are really have invested more in the user experience. And so, you know, compliance is one thing. You know, at Fable, we're encouraging organizations to move beyond compliance. I think compliance is maybe, again, like a place to start, but doesn't necessarily impact every user experience. And so, you know, when speaking with some of our testers and they meet with one of our customers and they're able to share some of the pain points that they experience and share some of their feedback, and they meet with that customer again, maybe a month or a couple of months later, and they see that the issues that they brought up have been remedied, or at least, you know, there's been a shot at a remedy. There's so much value there. I mean, our testers are compensated and they appreciate that. But the other thing that that really, I think, stands out is that their voice is being heard and that they are a part of that process. And, you know, the customers who we work with impact tens of thousands, if not millions of people. You know, we're working with large scale organizations like Slack, Walmart, Kijiji. So places that, you know, millions of people go to every day. And that means that, you know, that particular flow or that particular aspect of that product has been made accessible. And Shane, again, you worked in our community and you talk with our testers far more than I do. Is there anything else along those lines, or like wins in accessibility that stand out for you?
You mentioned actually quite a bit that I would have said, but yeah, like just the fact
Sorry.
that it's all good. It just the fact that, like, yeah, our testers, they, like you said, like, you know, they go back to this website or this app like a month or two later and they see the changes and they really appreciate it. And you know, our community, they do chat with each other and with us, and like they get excited about the changes being made, and we get excited about it as well. And you know, I do work closely with a lot of our community. Like I do work closely with our community, I should be saying. And, you know, our community is a group of very special people, and they really do care about what they do. And when something is implemented that they've you know, suggested, or the feedback that they've given, like it is a good feeling. And you know, I used to be a tester, as I mentioned earlier, and you know, the same thing, like the things that I've suggested like in the past, just seeing it done is like really, it means the world to people. And you know, being and it's helping millions of people across really across the world and the
And
net.
from a
And
business standpoint, you can kind of say that, you know, hey, if this
yeah,
you make this change, I'm going to tell everybody about it. I'm going to tell
100
them until they tell me to stop talking about it, sort of idea, right?
100% exactly. Word of mouth is a wonderful thing. And yeah, it's, I don't know what else to say other than like it's pretty amazing the things that I see being changed. And you know, I get to see a lot of the feedback that comes in as well. And seeing that it's actually being implemented with our customers
And it's
is
so
amazing.
great that you guys use people that, you know, like I said, been there, done that, got the t-shirt
Yep.
sort of idea. Because you think back to that old cartoon where the Boy Scout, you know, helped the blind lady or across the street, and then
Mhm.
he took her the wrong way, you know. It was like, well, thanks to the help, but I was going that way, sort of idea.
Yeah.
When I did a gadget workshop I've done for years, and after about the first year or something like that, I stopped telling people what the gadgets were, and it really opened up the whole thing. Because I don't, like you said, it's always changing. This person, if I tell them it's for this, they may not grab it, turn it upside down and go, I've been looking for, this is exactly what I need. But if I tell them, all of a sudden their brain says, oh, that's what it's for, and they don't think past that, right? So
Mhm.
that's another great sort of pat in the back, just so to say. I had a question here for Fable. One of the key aspects of your company is that you work directly with people with disabilities. So I'm basically saying what I just said, to consult accessible disability services. So can you explain what it looks like? Because I signed up, but I haven't done anything yet. So maybe you can help me start.
Shane, do you want to take that one?
So do you want to know like how it kind of works as a tester, or do you want to know
Yeah.
like, okay, so cool. Basically, what happens is our customers will submit what we call as requests, but what it is like the test or the task flow, or it might be an interview or a meeting or something along those lines. And what happens is we will release it to our community of testers, and um, uh, sorry, our community of testers, to what that customer is looking for. And depending on what type of request it is, our testers will, whatever tester accepts that request or is doing that request, and depending on what type of request it is, let's just say it's a task flow, for example. And a task flow is basically a series of steps that a tester will follow exactly, or will follow on a website. And it might be, say, step one, navigate to the main menu and select banking. Step two might be navigate to business and select it. Step three might say sign in to your account using the provided login credentials. And as they do this, if there are any usability or accessibility issues that come up, our accessibility testers will report those through our platform, Fable Engage. And what happens is when they put this information in and the feedback, they, you know, say, hey, this is something that I found. Maybe it's an unlabeled button, for example, and like I cannot hit submit to log into this website to complete this task flow. And because the button itself is not is unlabeled. And what happens is in this particular request type, the feedback that they give, like usually it's you know, this is what the issue is and this is how I suggest, you know, that it can be fixed. And I don't mean coding, but I mean like this is, I suggest like, labeling this button, and maybe they suggest how to label it. And what happens is like this feedback goes back to our customers, and they take this feedback, and our customers take it, they really do care. And as we mentioned earlier, they will, they will implement this feedback. And a month or two later, maybe this tester will go back on that website and, hey, this has been changed. So that's just like one of the request types that we have, as an example of kind of how it works. Our testers, they can work as much or a little as they want, as long as the work is there. And it's like, it is flexible work. And it's, we have this community of amazing people, as I mentioned, and, they also are there to support each other as well. And by that, I mean, like, we do have like a wiki that they chat with each other about, and maybe their assistive technology has done an update and something's just broken now and it's just not working, and they'll actually help each other with it. So like, we yes, we do have the business side, and where, we are, helping our customer with their websites or apps. But then there's also that side of our community engagement with each other, and engaging with customers, and our community as well. By doing this type of work, they're like gaining so many skills, such as like organizational skills, leadership skills, time management skills, communication skills. There's all sorts of skills and experiences that they're gaining, and they can actually, they can, it's helping them with their, they can put it on their resume and use it in interviews. It's just, a huge wealth of experience that they gain working with us. And, we get excited for them and with them.
There's a lady that I found out about a couple years ago that was, I believe, a model or something, and she contracted Lyme disease, and she started up a website mostly for I'm on it. I don't see a lot of jobs my sort of way, but it's mostly for the digital sort of and computers and whatnot. It's called Chronically Capable. I'll look up the link for that, and they're a great site as well. They're doing that same sort of, and I think that's one thing that COVID has helped with, being able to expand a little bit, and people can get those jobs. Like I said, but my wife never thought she would work from home because of the legal issue with her paperwork and whatnot else, and it was solved. And, it's as necessity, mother of invention sort of idea, right? And those are paid positions that you do at Fable.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
All of our testers, they're paid. We believe that, they should be paid for what they do. And, we pay them, a decent rate of pay. And we don't pay in gift cards or anything like that. We pay them, real money. And, they should decide what they want to do with their money, right? And yeah, it's absolutely, it's 100%. They're paid, and they get paid monthly.
All righty. So we're gonna swing over to a big brother question. is watching. No, many respondents are unsure about the topic of government supervision over digital accessibility. Do you think it's a good idea to have the government monitoring accessibility standards, or should private organizations be responsible, or should business and organizations be responsible? So they've already unmuted you, Katrina.
Yeah. I'm like, what, Jen, do you want to start, or do you want?
She's hiding. Where'd she go? Oh, there she is.
I mean, yes, someone should certainly be administering it. Typically we see private sector is often quicker to these types of things, just because they can be more nimble, they can be more agile, they are able to self-govern in a way that is hard when you are immensely large and bureaucratic like government is. I do think government has a role in it. I would certainly love to see us be a leader in that space. And I think that is the direction that we are heading in. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of thought experiment. I would be hesitant to have sort of individual businesses or organizations set their own standards, because I would want to see consistency and compliance and, you know, good governance, which obviously we have a role in. In terms of what that looks like at this stage, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't know, Katrina might have some thoughts.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think we see a lot more progress being made in the private sector. Also because there's that money side of it, of, you know, customers and clients and competing with others. And and the government, we don't have competition. You have to come to us. Like, it's like unfortunate for you, but we have the thing that you need, and so you have to come to us. And so it kind of creates a space of non-competition, where we're definitely not as far along as many private sector areas. That being said, you know, there's some areas that are going to be doing better than others, and others that will be more resistant. And particularly when you get into like really small businesses where there's this perceived cost of doing it. And I think really that perceived cost is that skills development of, like, if people knew that it wasn't actually that difficult, presumably you have a coder who is creating your website. If they just knew what they needed to do for their code, then it actually wouldn't be that big of a cost. So I think it would be great if government gets to a place, and I don't know how long it'll take us to get there, but where we have some sort of, you know, regulations around this, where there is accountability and governance, and where people can, you know, flag stuff that's not meeting that. And that does exist in other places. The US has stuff like that. So, you know, people can be held accountable, because if you're just kind of left to your own devices and you don't feel like you need to and you don't feel like you want to, then you shouldn't be able to just not do it.
This reminds me a bit about when I used to work in the bar business, and they brought in serving it right because of all the legal around, you know, over serving people. And I went to a class of managers, and the woman teaching it goes, okay, so how many years does everyone have in the business? And it was over 300. And then she stood up and goes, well, I used to do a catering business. And I go, and my boss got up and left because I'm not going to get taught by someone who had to cut off old Uncle Jimmy at the bar mitzvah. And you know, how are we going to stop that waitress who's got 2 kids and cutting off a guy who's tipping her a really crazy amount of money and tell him that she has to stop serving him? And that's kind of like the small business sort of idea, right? I don't know if that makes the same sort of sense, but so another question down to the government is, we've brought up a BC Accessibility Act. What are some of the government of BC's goals in regarding the improving digital accessibility of your services?
Before we get into that, Nate had his hand up. I don't know, did you want to jump in, Nate, before we move on to the next
sorry,
question?
I missed that.
No, that's good. Hey, thanks, Katrina. I appreciate that. Dave, pay attention, will you, buddy?
Okay, sorry.
No, seriously, and this is where it's really important, from my opinion, as somebody that also is a small business owner, that's where the training, the people that do these websites. If you're expecting me as a small business owner to learn how to code on top of everything else, forget it. Not going to happen, right? No. Not for most of us. So I need to be able to go to the marketplace and be able to buy these services for a price that's reasonable. Now, what's reasonable? Well, not 2 to 3 times what the regular fare is. And that's what's out there right now. So from that standpoint, it's really important that the bodies that govern, whether it's government, associations, whatever these are, that are teaching these folks how to code and the importance of accessibility coding, that is the key, so that it does become the standard. And then all of us, when we get our next website, it won't even be a conversation. It'll be like, oh yeah, you're going to do, like, this is how we do it. This is how we all do it. This is how everybody I went to school with does it. Oh, great. It's going to be good and it's going to work. If it's the way it is now, you're punishing small business. And not that we don't want accessibility, but don't punish small business because we don't have the skills. That's not our fault. Our specialty is this, our specialty is that. Get the people that do these things, hold them and their associations, their educational institutions, their bodies, hold them accountable, so that when we go to the marketplace, these things can be acquired at a fair price, whatever you deem
Don't
fair, whatever
attack
the
the low
market
hanging
is.
fruit, right?
Right,
Mhm.
right.
That happens so often, right? We're ready to comply, but oh, we'll just hit them. They'll pay, but we know they'll pay, but the ones that really need to pay have some way of getting away with it sometimes. So we've brought up the Accessibility Act. What are some of the governments we've brought that up? Sorry. And it has been put in the chat as well. I keep grabbing the wrong mouse, so here we go.
Yeah, Dave, I've forgotten what your question was.
Okay, well, we'll just go
Sorry.
with that. So, what are your goals in improving your accessibility of services? What are the government's goals?
Do you want to start, Jen? Or do you want me to?
You can go ahead. I'll chime in.
I don't want to get yelled at by Nate again. So
No. I mean, so within the act, one of the things that came out of that was that government needs to have a plan. And so we have the Accessible BC plan, and within there, under priority number 2, the government has committed itself to meeting WCAG AA, and not a specific version of WCAG, just AA, WCAG, whatever that version is, because we continue to get new versions of that across all of our websites. And then there's also something in there, I believe, about accessible services. It's all very vague language. Is very governmenty of us. But yeah, the intention is to commit ourselves to actually getting to a place where all of our websites and applications are meeting that WCAG compliance, so that we're at least hitting that as our starting point, and then going from there with, you know, doing more usability testing, getting into more of that. Okay, we've done the things that were in WCAG, but does this work for you? Maybe not. Why? Let's figure out what that looks like. So we do have commitments. Like, Jen, do you want to build on that?
I mean, I think that's the main one as it pertains to digital accessibility. There's quite a few of, like, all of government's priorities are outlined in the Accessible BC plan. I think the one that is sort of most top of mind for Katrina and I is that priority 2, because it does specify all government websites, services, and information, I believe. Like, it's very broad. Do need to be WCAG AA compliant by like 2024, which is an unreasonably short runway. 2025, still unreasonably short runway. That's not better. I mean, I think that's sort of the main one for digital accessibility.
And again, it comes down to you have to have that empowerment to be able to look for these things. And that's what's great about things like that, is have that confidence. All you guys are doing stuff to give people that confidence to ask about it, because there's times in your illness where you don't have it, and and that's the, you know, being able to go in and say, oh, you know, did you know you can ask for this, you know? Yeah. And you have to get past that. I have a question here for Neil Squire, but there's a screen pop up. There we go. Nate, you have a lot of great programs that make assistive technology available for Canadians, including a collaboration with Work BC that helps people with disabilities secure employment. Can you explain a bit more about this program and why assistive technology is so important for independent living?
What a wonderful softball question. Did we plant that one?
Yeah. Boom. And also, just quickly, we are working with Work BC on August 11th here at Lansdowne, and we have a job fair. So I just wanted to play a quick plug.
Oh, fantastic. Throw me that, send me an email about that, buddy, because the Work BC in Richmond hasn't reached out to me. I'd love to attend that if I can. Yeah. Hey, at Neil Squire, we're super blessed. We're in our 3rd iteration of an assistive technology in with ministry. The current one is called the Work BC Assistive Technology Services Program. So we serve 2 different types of people. One, an individual who's seeking employment, skill development through training through a Work BC center. They're not employed, but they're trying to get in the workforce. They're not employed, but they're trying to increase their education level to seek a better employment situation. So Work BC sends that individual to us. We do that very important step that I mentioned earlier about doing an assessment to truly understand the individual in front of us, their unique barriers to those activities, and then our occupational therapist will work with one of our assistive technology specialists or professionals to determine what the path is. What are the solution or solutions that could be high tech, low tech, software, hardware, ergonomics, hearing aids, visual aids, not eyeglasses, but other more robust things like we've talked about, like screen readers for somebody that's low vision or blind. And we provide those products to those individuals. The other group of people are your friends and neighbors that are in the workforce. Your sister, your brother, your cousin, that lady you used to play hockey with, that guy you play softball with on the weekend. They've got a job. They're employed part-time, full-time, or self-employed, mostly working in a small business or self-employed or a community organization, because all employers have a duty to accommodate the needs of their team members, their staff, but not all employers can. It may be a hardship of financial. It may cause other hardships that we're not sure about, that we discover through the process. So our focus is small business for those folks, but the process is the same. They apply, we vet their application. There might be some back and forth. Once they're approved, same thing. Do that assessment, generate a report, work with our AT specialists. Now it is means tested to a point where we have to look at, for people, especially if they're employed, we have to look at their income or family income. If they're a family unit, less expenses, but we look at a 30-day window. So if somebody needs hearing aids that are $4,000 to $8,000 a pair, and at the end of the 1 month period, they have $500 that's unencumbered, that's their contribution to the hearing aids. We don't have to look at their entire yearly income. We just want to see what they have, their ability to contribute. The program's well funded, we'll look after the rest. If they're employed and they've got benefits, them or their spouse or both, we're going to collect all those dollars. But the program's amazing. And here's what it's done. It helps 800 to 1,200 British Columbians every year either seek and achieve better employment goals or outcomes, or more, even equally important, stay in the workforce. Because what we don't want to see is somebody fall through the cracks, because once you lose those employment opportunities, it's often much harder to get back in the workforce. So Neil Squire has been doing that. We're going to celebrate our 40th birthday next year. We have a robust employment program that we run federally as well, where some of that same activity happens, where that person with a disability, we help them get the tools that they need to be successful in the workplace. And that's the key. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate that. We will invite you to the party because we're having one next year. I promise.
And like, I'm kind of like the poster boy for that in a sense.
You're a poster boy for a lot of things, my friend.
I was gonna say, not that I'm a poster boy for many things, but not at my age anymore. But I work 15 hours a week, and that's where I've gotten to in 25 years of my illness. But if I hadn't been able to get access to a lot of that and go back to school and whatnot else, I was basically put on a shelf. I got CPP, and that cut my payment from my employer in half. And they were happy to just, hey, we're only paying half now. Just let him work it out until he's 60, right? And they just basically put me on the shelf, and my brain was dying, and I was getting worse and worse every day. And I said, I got to find out how to do this. I don't want to disappear. So, and I hope that we can help other people with things like that in the same situation, not to get too sappy and teary-eyed on you.
No, but Dave, you are the poster boy for that example of, you found where the line was.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because nobody at the end of their workday should have to go straight home to bed and just not have any sort of life outside of that. And I know you have found that balance, and you know where that line is for you, and you know when you get a self-care, and you know when you can dig in and dig deeper, and you know when you shouldn't, and that is all part of the process too. And if assistive technology can help somebody do that, then that's a win, right?
You get that functional range, I call it.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot, and not a lot of places, especially unionized places, allow you to do that. It's either acute injury, you're either better or you're not, right? And that's where a lot of people end up not going back to work because of that. And there's a lot of very smart people being stuck at home that with just one assistive technology, one chair, the change could be huge, and it's still happening. It is a lot better, but I have still seen it in many different places and people that I've talked to. let's go to another question. I'll get off my soapbox now. Ian, you work directly with people with disabilities to improve accessible technology, and your offerings through your peer group, which is, I think, another one of my big things is I used to tell people, it's like, I don't want to talk to another doctor. I want to know how that guy who with my same illness is climbing the grouse grind. How is he doing that? I want to know that. I don't want another pill, right? Can you talk more about this program and some of the valuable contributions people with disabilities have made to the program?
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. If I want to learn about what it's like to be on a ventilator, I want to speak to somebody who is on a ventilator. So that's the whole point. Peers utilize their lived experience with assistive technology to promote an inclusive environment for everyone. The peer team also facilitates connections between people with disabilities and relevant organizations, like Neil Squire, and by providing technical and community support, peers help peers overcome barriers and maximize independence.
And yeah, and that is the great thing. We as soon as you get everyone together, sometimes you might not find everything else, but you're in the right spot, and you know that those people, and that's kind of like what I say. The stuff that I found out, if I just keep it to myself, what use is it? So I basically say this year my word was collaboration, and I want you to get sick of seeing me. So
I love it. Yeah,
and that's that isolation part, is that people will fall back into that, and that's just the worst. Especially if your illness or your injury was quick, your change in your life is massive and fast. I became a man of about 30 years older than I was within a 6-month period, and that's just imagine that, right? And it's all of a sudden and people would like, oh, what are you going to do now? Okay, I just had my career ripped out from underneath me. Give me a little time to figure this out, right? We had talked about this in our pre-meeting about AI and robotic technology, which is very hot. Do you think these advancements are positively benefit digital accessibility? I know that there's one of the strikes for the writers and everything, and the actors is all about using the actors' likenesses or lessening them with AI or something. I was just reading that for the strike that's going on down in the States.
One of the things they talk about, Dave, is the ability for the movie houses, any sort of where these folks' likenesses and images can be used without their consent moving forward into perpetuity. Right. That's one of the things on top. And then the writers are afraid that they will use AI, which if you've ever used ChatGPT, you can ask it to write a playwright or a play for you based on this, this, and this. And it's frighteningly fast at what it can do. So they're really afraid of the writers, human writers, losing that ability to use their craft.
And to that, I'm like the ChatGPT. That is a great resource for people if you are looking for how to fix something and you're not sure how. You can do things like say, how do I create an accessible button? And it will give you the code. And so there is lots of like really positive things that it can be used for. Always fact check it, obviously. I hope that goes without saying. It's like a really confident employee.
The first time I used voice software on an email, I put a little thing going, if I've asked for your firstborn male child accidentally, please ignore. I was so scared because I got so lazy so quick, right?
Yeah, can be used for good. Kim has her hand up though. And Ian also had his out.
Yeah, Ian, I'll throw to you first if you want to chime in.
Sure, yeah, I saw what I was going to say in the chat as well, but it's wonderful for converting text into plain language. If you don't understand something, copy and paste it into ChatGPT and say, explain this to a 10-year-old or to a 90-year-old, and it will simplify it for you.
What about medical information? Have you tried that?
I have, and oddly enough, it told me exactly what my specialist told me. So I don't know if my doctor is using ChatGPT or if it's just on point.
Some plagiarism going on somewhere.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are some really great specific examples. Another one that comes to mind is I know that Microsoft released Copilot, and one of the functions it has is it can summarize all of your emails. Say you have 90 emails and can summarize them into whatever, a couple of minutes of listening. And Dave, to your point, you shared a personal example of being able to sit at your computer for 15 minutes, or maybe that was another example of just in general. And maybe that's something that affects you. You can't spend a lot of time on screens. And so that's maybe something that can help you, and that's AI. Even, and AI has been slowly being put into our lives over the past several years. You can think of even when you're writing a document or writing an email, and it has those text prompts, right? So it might have a prompt to, seeing a couple of nods. So a prompt to finish your sentence or finish a particular phrase, that's AI. Right. And so, you can hit tab instead of hitting 12 different keys. And so can save some of those keystrokes. And that maybe, that could really matter for some folks. The other thing, I think, AI is still relatively new, and we have such a great opportunity to make it accessible and to make these products accessible. And that's really exciting. Whether we as a community will be taken up on that is yet to be seen. But I know that I have one colleague in particular who's just really delving into the AI space specifically so that she can have a thorough understanding of it and advocate for accessibility within the AI space.
Like I remember saying that my father-in-law had a problem with voice software. He couldn't use it because of an accent. And so I could definitely see it. If you had created the AI for that, it may have really helped with the that bridge. You give the AI, you give the accented voice to the AI, and he reprogram, process it to something that the Dragon Speak would understand. Would that work?
Not being an expert in AI or Dragon, I'm going to say yes.
Dave, how old is that version of Dragon?
Oh, I'm not sure, but it's I know that's kind of one of my pet peeves is how Dragon got bought up recently, right?
Yeah, so Dragon was purchased by Microsoft. Nuance is the company that invented Dragon, and
I have not liked it since it's been changed. I've not liked it.
Well, fair enough. And who am I to convince you of something, my friend? But Dragon does have the ability, actually, in the setup mode, to tell the software what accent that you're using. If somebody's accent is maybe very, very thick, that obviously could still be problematic. However, Gordon Watt, that works for us, is Scottish, has a very heavy Scottish brogue accent, especially, right? Doesn't he, Kim? Right?
Really very thick.
Yeah. Really very thick. And especially when he's been back home or been talking to his mother over the weekend. But Dragon understands Gordon very well. So the software has evolved over the period of time. And while your comments about Microsoft taking it over certainly are valid, the one good thing about that is Windows 11 has much more accessibility built into it from their knowledge of Nuance. And I'm sure Dragon or Microsoft Windows 12 will have even more of that accessibility built in. So hopefully that's the good news there.
This just popped into my head. I have a friend that down in the States that you guys may know of. Her name is Nina G, and she is one of the first female or only female stuttering stand-up comedians. And it just made me think, what is with that sort of issue, stuttering and whatnot else? How does accessible work for that? Has there been any sort of, I know I'm going off
Kim, do you have
process here, but
much knowledge on the oh boy, now I'm gonna it's a piece of software that goes with a hearing aid, and I know a man that uses it who has a terrible stuttering problem, and it is called, oh goodness, I'll find it. Maybe somebody can put it in the chat. But it is amazing on how it after just a couple moments, how he can go from a full stutter to regular conversation. And it was a game changer for this man. And we'll find it and put it in the chat.
All right. It just kind of popped in my head. I was curious if there was some addressing there. We've got another question here. Can you name some helpful resources for people with disabilities who want to be more involved in the digital world, but are not know where to start or do not have the funds to seek out assistive technology? So this would be more like clubs or that sort of social media sort of issues, I guess. I know that there's a couple of sites that there's a lot. If you go to the associations for different illnesses, that's a good place to start. That's one I'll throw out there. I don't know who else wants to chime in. So if you have whatever your illness or disability is, a lot of times there's youth groups, if that's where your age group is and whatnot. So that's a good place to start that I usually suggest people to go.
I would also suggest and I'll put a link to it in the chat, but there is an introduction to web accessibility that's a free course that people can take. And it's put together by the W3C, who are the folks that wrote WCAG. So it's really good. I totally recommend taking a look at it and taking it if you have the time. But there are lots of free courses within those kind of like edX, Coursera. I know there's other ones, but those platforms where they're providing free education to people. So if you go into those and kind of poke around in different parts, either if you're interested in specifically just learning kind of like the introductory part, or you want to get a little bit more into the coding or user experience or whatever it is that you're looking at, there's lots of courses available for free that people can take.
All righty. So what else we got here? What are the ways you or your organizations are increasing awareness on digital accessibility, and how can a community member advocate for the same? So I know from our standpoint here at RCD, we try to give people as much information and networking as possible and give them sort of a community center to come to. And that sometimes gets people sort of, gives them a little bit of empowerment to start. Hey, I sort of like that. I try my best to bring whatever possible in that people ask me to, so that they can get a little taste without a full commitment. Sometimes they're very nervous. Sometimes their illness or their disability sort of restricts, from anxiety point of view and stuff like that. So if I can sort of glean through something and see if it's really something that they'll do, that they won't have to buy 6 weeks of a course that they didn't like after the first week. That's what we kind of do here. How about you guys, Ian?
We really try to connect peers with other peers who have similar disabilities, so that they can ask those hard questions and see what technology they're using and if it would be suitable.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's that peer sense is just really where the best is. The respondents noticed that they said that people with disabilities have a right to be provided with assistive technology. They need to engage adequately with digital service. One key issue with this is that assistive technology is not affordable to many Canadians. How has there been progress in making these services less costly? All right. How about you, Shane?
Oh boy. Yeah, so making assistive technology less costly. Again, like there's some programs out there, like I mentioned earlier, like the ADP, so Assistive Disabilities Program, which will fund the 75%. Reaching out to various service clubs, grants, scholarships, making the assistive technology more affordable. On the other hand, the companies themselves that create this assistive technology, I'm not really sure how to answer that, if I'm going to be honest, on a company side, but looking to be able to afford that assistive technology. Like I said, like there's those organizations advocacy organizations as well. Even like something along the lines of the March of Dimes, them helping you work with governments to be able to get, to be able to afford assistive technology, or even go back to school, for example. Just there's just trying to find the organization. So, like, or trying to find the funding. Again, ask questions,
Yeah.
have support. When I started losing my sight back in 2004, it was very rapid and very quick. And I went through every emotion possible, from anger to grief to,
Yeah.
it
Your
was
stages.
the stage, exactly, the stages. And it was very confusing back then. And if I didn't have the support that I had back then, I don't know where I would be, because I certainly did not ask the questions back then.
And that's
my
that empowerment issue is the big thing, is that ask the questions. Don't
100%.
just don't just pay out the money and say, oh, well, this is definitely something they're not going to help with. I just have to sort of
Exactly.
do it. Right.
I didn't
And
exactly. I didn't know what was available for me at all back then, and I didn't know where to look, nothing. And I had support, and back then, the frame of mind that I was in, like I said, like, there's anger, there's the confusion, there's, like, you name it, I went through it, but without, say, my family members, especially my wife, who was able to help me and help start reaching out to organizations and things, and get me, and then also encourage me, and then encourage me to start doing these things. It's all important. So
right. I have a
yeah.
lot of people, a lot of like spouses and partners of people that say, can you talk to my so-and-so? And I've talked to them, and they're in that yeah, but stage, I call it, where they're
Mhm.
spending more energy figuring out why they can't do something instead of why they can. And it's
Yep.
not a fault, it's a stage.
Yep.
You will get
100%.
through that stage at some point, and you will not be a yeah butter all the time.
Exactly.
So it's just, but it's a stage that you have to get through. I've got a whole bunch of hands that I'm not going to miss, Nate. So I'll start with you, Kim.
Awesome, thank you. One thing that came to mind in terms of accessing resources, and to Shane's point, is I think often whether you're an individual who's acquired a disability or you've had a disability your entire life, you don't know what you don't know. And so there's been some conversation around peer groups. I think the other thing that can be helpful is looking for a regional disability resource center. So I've been lucky enough to be on the board at the Victoria Disability Resource Center for the past few years, but they exist throughout the province, they exist throughout the country, and that is maybe a starting point, because other organizations have more specialties. And so whether you're directed to an organization like Neil Squire, or the Work BC ATS program, or something else that exists in other parts of the country, that's a great starting point. And you can get support in your technical needs, but then Shane, you also talked a little bit about the emotional roller coaster that you went through, and so maybe referring you to peer groups who experience the world in the same way that you do. And so that's maybe a good starting point in terms of reducing the cost of these tools overall. I mean, we could look at government subsidies, but that's not the only thing. I think that maybe an acquisition, by Microsoft of Dragon, maybe that's a good thing. The kind of seemingly infinite resources that Microsoft has, if they can continue to refine that tool so that it is more cost effective to make, I would hope that that would be put on the consumer, and so would cost less to buy. Right now, Dragon is an expensive tool to buy if it's not subsidized. And I believe, maybe Nate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Dave, if you still use it, it's an annual subscription, right? And so that can add up. Right. And so again, if we can have kind of more interest or more resources going into the design and development of these tools so that they can be produced in a more cost-effective way, then that can be a ripple effect onto the consumer. One would hope. It's maybe not going to go that way, but with more competition typically comes more options for
that's kind of what I
consumers.
mentioned with the electric bike thing. right? Now that there was so much more ask for it, it's now become so more mainstream than it was just for a certain group before, right?
Yeah, and Nate and Ian both had their hands up, so I'll
Yes,
talking.
I'm going to go to Ian first. I'm going to punish Nate.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, to reiterate what Kim said, there are so many organizations out there that are here to help. Whether it's Technology for Living, whether it's Neil Squire, the Touchwood Society, Kaya, there are so many.
Oh yes,
have
yep.
to ask
Kaya.
the questions because that's a starting point, and also with large corporations like Microsoft and Apple, understanding that accessibility is so important, they are implementing it. There is a dictation software built in to Windows and to other platforms now, where you don't need to buy third-party technology and software to help you in the starting stages. Like there are free screen readers. They're not as good, but it's an excellent starting point.
But at least it gives you that bet to know, hey, I want something that's better, or this is enough that I can use this. But if you're going to use it a lot, because I always tell people that when they're trying an assistive technology, it's like, yeah, you don't want to commit to that huge one. So if you, even if it's like a physical tool, go buy it at the dollar store. It's a really cheap one, but see if you want it. And then you can go out later. If you're using it all the time and it's breaking, because you then go and find a really expensive one or one that's built better, right? And that way you're not throwing that all the way in, sort of idea. And just before I go to Nate, just like you mentioned, Kim, there's the different resource centers. IL Canada, Independent Living Canada, that's RCD is one. There are many all over the country, from West Coast to East Coast. So again, that's the independent living philosophy, is that we help people help themselves to get to where they're going. So go ahead, Nate. I can see the smoke coming out of your ears.
There's no smoke, buddy. There's no smoke. If there was, somebody would run in here with a fire extinguisher, I'm sure. But the important thing too is the layering of knowledge. Who, by a show of hands on the panel today, could go into their Outlook program and use either the dictate feature or where the emails can be spoken to you? Who knows how to do that? Okay, great. So now imagine somebody that has no knowledge of Outlook, no knowledge of all these things, and now you want them to try and use this stuff. So it takes a layering of knowledge base to get to a point where you can use some of these tools, unless you got somebody there to hold your hand. So speaking of hold your hand, is Neil Squire has two amazing programs that we run either locally called Computer Comfort, or using distance learning called Distance Computer Comfort, where somebody that self-identifies as having a disability and they want to learn about technology, we'll do it for free. We'll either do it with one of our paid staff members or one of our amazing volunteers. We can teach people how to use assistive technologies. We can teach people how to use the Microsoft suite of products, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. We can teach people how to effectively use iPhones and iPads, Google or Android phones and tablets, and give them that baseline of knowledge, so that when they have that baseline, now they can go to YouTube, have a little bit of success, and go learn about a bunch of stuff that way, or have a conversation with their neighbor that's always trying to teach them this high level stuff and they never had the baseline to learn. So that capability is out there, but for somebody that's starting from scratch, you can't just throw them into a Microsoft certified training program, because they can't even get past first base. And then lastly, here's the good news about Nuance. Sometimes when a big company like Microsoft buys a company, they fold it into the big umbrella. If you go to the Nuance website right now, Nuance as an organization is still an organization that's doing their thing. Of course, Microsoft is on their website now, but Nuance is still doing what Nuance has always done, which is building quality voice activated programs to help people that struggle with that sort of thing in their day, whether it's from an employment thing or otherwise. So there is some good news there.
All right, awesome. So we're coming around to the end, and I want to thank everybody for putting up with me. I tried to keep my dog appearance to the end of the program. He was sleeping for a while, and I'll pass everything back to Emily. And I hope everyone got some great information. I know I did.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. You did such an incredible job at facilitating the conversation, and I think everybody will leave with some resources and some knowledge. I certainly have learned a lot of things, and I think it was a really great, informative discussion. So thanks so much for everyone for attending the Accessible Community Forum on Digital Accessibility. We had a great conversation today with lots of valid points and thoughts brought to the table. I'm going to post in the chat everyone on the panel's direct email. So if you have any questions, they have given me their permission that you can email them directly. I'm also going to post my email in the chat for those of you that don't know about it. If you have any follow-up questions, concerns, comments on how we can do better, suggestions for topics in the future, you can email me at echambers@connectra.org. Just a reminder, a transcript of this event will be emailed out to all attendees, as well as a summary of our survey findings from last week. There'll also be a chat transcript sent out, and we will be adding all of these resources mentioned to our website at connectra.org. So that will all be up in about a week's time. Check out all of our various events at connectra.org/events. I will put that in the chat as well. We have weekly programming, chair yoga, adaptive fitness, dance, rotating Mondays. So come and hang out with us again. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Well done,
Thank
Dave.
you.
See everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.